a household voice for all the Premier League fans, a voice that went over the world during 5 World Cup finals, and most importantly, a voice that we have enjoyed thoroughly over the course of time. We have the one and only Jim Proudfoot with us. Welcome to the Sports Giant. We present you our new series, Off the Pitch, and we have a very special guest in Jim Proudfoot today. Hello, Jim. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Anurag. Thank you very much for the invitation to come and speak to you today.
Thank you so much, Jim. It is our pleasure indeed. And I know these last few months have been incredibly difficult for all of us. So, how has it been for you? I mean, just before right now, I know you are a little busy. You were yesterday with the West Ham game, as you just mentioned, and you're also doing the Arsenal game in Premier League just a few days back. Before that, before football really resumed, how was it for you?
Lockdown was strange, as I'm sure it was for everybody. I think that you've got to make the best of any given situation. I was one of the very fortunate people that it was relatively easy to make the best of it. I live in the countryside in the south of England.
Yeah.
So it's easy for me to stay socially distanced, but to go out for walks. And I loved spending time with my family. I've got 4 children, 2 of whom are away at college and working. The younger 2, I haven't spent enough time with them over the years, and that's a byproduct of the wonderful job I'm fortunate to have. But having 3 months where I couldn't work and couldn't think about football really was, in that way, it was a blessing because I could spend time with them and really enjoy the company of the family. So I found lockdown easier than many did. I must admit I was fortunate in that regard. But that said, of course, when we got to the stage where football was back, it was great to go back to work and to go back to doing the job and to seeing, albeit in a working environment from a distance, seeing people that I regard as close friends that I work with. So it was good. My story is much easier than so many. I'm very fortunate in that regard.
Indeed. I think a lot of us who have joined the call right now, I think we must say even our lockdown story is not very complicated, to be very thankful. And how difficult has it been as a commentator for you to get into the new normal, as that's what they're calling it right now? There is no crowd, there's no energy to feed off from. There is you almost can listen to the players. I don't know if you can, but that's what we are getting. We are also getting the fake audios, which is sort of off-putting, but something. It's an effort that they are putting to try and make this experience a little more real, but it is sort of off-putting. How has it been for you as a commentator?
Well, the first game that I did was the first game back out of lockdown on that first day in the middle of June. Aston Villa against Sheffield United. You remember that was the game where the goal line technology failed. Controversially, and obviously there were 6 weeks on, pretty big ramifications for that. Now at Villa Park, we're removed. We actually commentate on the other side of the ground, if you will. So you're away from everybody. And as a first experience of commentating with no fans in there, that was very strange indeed, because it was completely quiet. If you're commentating at most of the stadium where at least you're over the same side of the pitch as maybe the substitutes, there is a little bit of sort of peripheral noise that is there and a little bit. But that match at Aston Villa was strange. So that was an interesting indoctrination into it. In terms of our working routines, it makes everything different. I tend to get there really early before a game, 3.5 hours before kickoff. And I don't have an office job in the same way as many. So when we're at matches, that is the office, if you like. So you're seeing people, you're seeing your mates, and you're seeing colleagues. You're trying to glean some information as well. Now, these days, you don't have the ability to be able to do that because we're all socially distanced. There's no press room. So you are literally walking in and going straight to your commentary position. So it is a very different way of working to that we're used to. I'm like you. My preference is when I'm watching a game, I don't like the fake crowd noise. I much rather listen to the tactical instructions and the swearing and the yelps of pain from the players. I find that a much more realistic experience. I've watched a lot of very low-level non-league football in my time, and I love doing that. And this sort of distills the Premier League, if you like, down to that sort of same raw experience. And much as I can't wait for the fans to be back in and us to enjoy the sort of the full Monty again as it should be, it has been very interesting in that regard. As I say, I don't like listening to the fake effects, but having said that, I think it's brilliant the way that they do it. And I know lots of people who have the complete opposite view to me, and they like the noise, and they will commentate indeed with the fake effects because they feel that it helps them to perform a little bit better and to generate a little bit of atmosphere in the commentary as well. It's not the way that I do it, but we're very fortunate. We're given the option when we get there to either listen to it or not.
Indeed. I mean, the entire distortion of the footballing schedule, it has had significant knock-on effects on everyone. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And just drifting past that conversation now, can you talk us through your early days in commentary and how did you sort of get into this job?
Well, I went to university with no thoughts really of what I wanted to do. I had done sort of maths-based A-levels. I've done maths, I've done economics, and I sort of was, I suppose, drifting towards potentially a job in finance somewhere. But I'd always had an interest in football, always been interested in football, and I'd always had an interest in the media, particularly radio. I grew up in the Midlands, and commercial radio was very, very strong. Now, there wasn't an awful lot of sport on commercial radio, but we had a multitude of stations we could choose to listen to, who all had a very separate and defined local identity. And I just love radio. So when I went to university, one of the things that I wanted to do was get involved in the university radio station in some regard. And after doing 4 weeks and having been involved on sports program, I instantly knew exactly what I wanted to do, and I wanted to be a football reporter and a football commentator. And so it was almost a light bulb moment, and from that point it was, okay, this is what I want to do for a living, and how do I go about doing it? So I ended up leaving my economics degree, which is a euphemistic way of saying that I failed a lot of exams. I went to college, to journalism college, down in Cornwall. I did a news journalism qualification, and then I got into local radio by being a newsreader who did a little bit of sport. One of the best radio commentators over here is a guy called John Murray, whose name may be familiar to you if you listen to the World Service. He doesn't do worldwide football commentary on the telly, but he is a voice that you will hear on the World Service, and he was my boss. So I was very fortunate that a local radio station in Middlesbrough, I was 21, he was, I don't know, 25, 26, but he was my boss, and I learned so much from him over the 6 months we worked together before he went and signed up for the BBC. And so I was very fortunate that, and I think a lot of people would say that to have been in a position where you've worked in the industry for a good few years, as I've been fortunate to do, you need a lot of luck along the way somewhere, and I certainly have had, huge dollops of that throughout the way. I've been very fortunate, and that was how I got started. And from that point, having realised that I much preferred doing the sport rather than the news, I then got a job working for Capital Radio in London, and I moved down there in 1994, and I've been doing sport full time ever since.
Indeed, that's really great the way it transpired for you. And early on, not just early on, growing up or till date, who are the commentators who inspired you the most? Because the times that you're mentioning, 90s and the early 90s or the late 80s, I think those were times when we had some really big names like Brian Moore or Peter Jones, and these are not voices that we heard, but we get to listen to a lot about them.
Well, that's fantastic that you've named two names there, and you've named the two names. Now, Brian Moore, I was never fortunate enough to meet either Brian Moore or Peter Jones. Brian Moore's commentary never used to be live, except for World Cups, but he used to commentate on matches involving London teams, and we would see the highlights of those in the Midlands, and his voice was absolutely fantastic. If you actually distill what he said, he didn't really say very much. And that's a compliment as opposed to a criticism, because he had the ability to keep it minimalistic, but he was a little bit more passionate than maybe his counterparts on BBC television. And he was just a fantastic man to listen to. As I say, I've never met him, but those who did, I've never heard anybody have a bad word to say about him as a fellow. And unfortunately, left us far too soon. And I will vividly remember hearing of his passing, because it was the same night that England won 5-1 in Munich against Germany. So we were all euphoric leaving the stadium.
If I'm not wrong, right?
2001. What did I say? 2005. 2001. September 2001. So we were all euphoric, having left the stadium in Munich and then heard the news. The other commentator that you mentioned, Peter Jones. Peter Jones was a Welshman who had, again, if I say he had a sing-song voice, that sounds like an insult, and it isn't meant to be at all. It's a compliment, but he had an ability to be able to vary the tone and the pitch of his commentary when he was talking, to really bring the best out of the game, because he had a Welsh accent as well that suited him. I vividly remember coming back, listening to a game when I was young. He would say, "It's Newcastle 2, Manchester United 4," and just had the wonderful way of delivering. And he was the commentator on all the big games. He and Brian Butler when I was growing up on the radio. So those are two names that I very much enjoyed listening to. A generation above me. You then get Martin Tyler, who's been sort of the doyen of TV commentators in this country all the time that I've been working, and Martin is somebody that I'm fortunate enough to know, and he's been somebody that has given me some very sage pieces of advice over the years as well. And he's somebody else that you consider that he's now 75, and yet right at the top of the industry still. I mean, he's had a fantastic career. So, we're lucky. I think that there are lots of people that you can look up to, but the ones that you've mentioned are absolutely top of the list.
Yeah, indeed. The accent thing that you mentioned, one thing that I remember, I mean, a few years back, I remember listening to Peter Jones. It wasn't precisely commentary, but I think it was there was a 1-minute clip of Peter Jones talking about the Hillsborough incident, where he says he ends with the sun keeps shining. My God, that really it still gives me chills. I think that is that's the impact that they must have had on your generation, and you people right now are having a similar impact on our generation right now. So thank you for that. Research can get tricky during a commentator, especially when you are commentating on Champions League game, let's say, which involves a team which is not which you don't cover on a regular basis. Over the years, I'm sure you must have had many such instances where you really had to struggle to get the research done. And any memories of games like that where you struggle to, get the pronunciation or player identification on the ground? Was it a little tricky?
Yes. I'm of the generation where, so I'm 47. When I started work, I'd never used a mobile phone, and I didn't see the internet until I'm trying to think how many jobs I'd had before I ever used the internet. It was probably my 4th job. So it was very different. And this is something that my kids can't get their head around. What are you life without the internet? How did that work? Well, I don't know, looking back on it. I don't really know how it did work. What it meant was lots of longhand research, keeping books with results and lineups in, and if you ever still work that way, because it's nice to have it all to hand. But yes, you do early rounds in Europe. Could be difficult because you'd be doing matches. I remember doing a Spurs game against Ammonia Nicosia, 25 years ago, and Well, the best will in the world, I don't really know too much about these guys. Well, you can phone up the club and speak to a press officer, but even that was a different world because the price of telephone calls was so expensive back then compared to what it is now. So it was very different. I'm not exposing any state secrets by really betraying how we got round it. If you had somebody whose name you couldn't pronounce, well, they wouldn't touch the ball particularly often in your commentary, and you just hope that they didn't score. When you're doing radio, you can get away with a lot more than you can on television, and even on TV to a certain extent, where there's no obligation to name every player who has possession. And maybe, yes, if there's a very difficult name, you don't name him quite so often when the ball comes his way. In this day and age, I guess all our excuses are taken away from us, which is a good thing, because the world's a village these days. So it's much easier to do the research. It's much easier to speak to people that you need to fill in the gaps that you can't get. But yeah, certainly back in the old days, the senior commentators would have anecdotes about moments that they had, particularly traveling as well. In local radio, where you would go to, the first game that I ever did abroad was in Bulgaria, and it was a 4-day trip. I was covering Newcastle, and we got to the ground in Sofia the day before the game. Couldn't get any of the equipment working. We were told, don't worry, it'll all be fine tomorrow. And guess what? It wasn't. So I was out there for 4 days and I never got on air. Those are the kind of things that, looking back, it is amazing that we got away with it. These days, it wouldn't happen. Everything is much more professional, and football has moved on, and the coverage of football, I think, has moved on immeasurably as technology has progressed. Football has certainly stayed up, stayed apace with it and gone hand in hand over the last 25 years that I've been working.
Indeed, I mean, as you mentioned about the mistakes or things that you could let go, but currently, if you are letting go of something, social media is something that will let you know that you have missed this out. And as you mentioned about the technology as well, it has brought in such a significant change to the broadcasting world around the world. Now, you yourself have seen so many changes over the years, and one significant change that has come in, which a lot of people have mentioned, that it has, I don't know if I can say hamper, but it has impacted commentary styles in many ways, which is the video assistant referee. So has it really impacted the way you go about your business?
Has it impacted the way I go about my business? No, I don't think
on the field, during game day.
You always have to have at the back of your mind that the goal might be chalked off. I think that as a commentator, you have to assume that it's going to stand, unless you've seen something that you think the VAR is going to look at. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. As a commentator, I'm more than happy to admit that you'll see somebody wheel away in celebration, and it's only then that you realise that there might be a problem. But I think you have to commentate and just assume that the goal is going to stand, and then it will quickly become obvious. And you're just talking to what you can see. So you have the level that it's a goal. Well, is it going to stand? You can ask the question as if you're a fan in the stand. What's happening here? What is the decision? I like VAR. I know a lot of people don't. I think that it's had teething troubles, and I would like to think that this second season of it in the Premier League, things will go much more smoothly. The first weekend certainly gives us hope that will be the case. I like the fact that the referees now will come over and will have a look themselves at monitors. I think that is something I couldn't really understand. Weren't doing that. I know that that was the instruction that they were told not to try and keep the game flowing, but I think that it needed it really, almost from a transparency point of view. So you know that the referee has changed his decision on the basis of something that he's then seen, as opposed to something that he's been told. The people, the VAR, at the hub, they're all qualified referees. I think the theory was that they, in the cold light of day, without people shouting down their necks, without players getting in their faces, they could make a more dispassionate and in all likelihood correct decision and an objective decision. But I think that the referee looking at it and, holding his hand if he's made a mistake. And I don't think that if the referee has made a mistake, I don't think that should count as a black mark against him from anybody, from PGMOL, from supporters, from the players, from anybody. If you make a mistake, if the net result is okay, that's fine. What I don't like is a decision that you think, well, I'm not sure about that, and maybe, and I'm not suggesting this has ever happened, but I would like to think that it was the case that the VAR didn't think, well, I won't overturn that one is close, and I won't overturn it because I don't want the referee to look bad. It doesn't matter. The referees are doing a fantastic job. They're doing a very tough job. I know for one, I wouldn't have a cat and house chance of being able to do it anything like the level that they do. So I just want the right results, and I want justice for the decisions, because some of them will end up being hugely significant decisions over the course of the season. And I think that we will now, in this second season of VAR implementation in the Premier League, I think we will get even closer to that. What you have to look at from a positive is the critical decisions have gone up, and I can't remember the exact figures, but the gap between where they were and perfection has almost been halved in that first season. So that's got to be a good thing. We're getting the big decisions correct. Now we just need to do it slightly more seamlessly if we can. As a commentator, sometimes you can be left high and dry because you don't know exactly what they're looking at. You will see the replay. Sometimes you'll see the replays. Sometimes you won't see the replays, and you watch the incident as it happened, and you can surmise what it is that they're looking at, but you don't know. And so the longer delays can be, from a commentary point of view, a little troublesome, because you don't want to prejudge the decision and you don't want to second guess it. So that's the only time that it's difficult from our point of view, really. It would be if we could hear all the discussion taking place, that would make it easier for us. But I understand why that doesn't happen.
Yeah, indeed. And as you've mentioned, the plight of the referees right now, I think, honestly, I think we all could agree that currently their job has become a lot more difficult. And all we can hope is the VAR can make it a lot more easier in this season or in the coming seasons. So, you have covered, obviously, Premier League for so long now. And one thing that we have to mention is that you also covered 5 World Cups. So how different is that experience of covering a World Cup as opposed to a Premier League season?
It's fantastic. It's in fact it's 6 now. I'm fortunate enough to say. My first one was in 1998. It's the best part of a 4-year cycle. The major tournaments are the things I most enjoy doing. I really like travelling, and obviously. Do a lot of miles in this part in this job, and I love England, and I like the travelling within England is good as well. But when you're going abroad to places that you wouldn't naturally spend a lot of time, it's just it's a sensational occasion, and I talk about this privilege a lot, and I really feel that when you're at a game, for instance, I was at the World Cup semi-final when Germany put 7 past Brazil. And you're sitting there thinking, I'm watching something that everybody around the world is watching. And it's sitting there with their jaws, to the floor. They can't believe what they're seeing. But also, this is a football match that people will still be talking about after I've died. And it will still be being referred to. And here I am, sitting, now watching it, taking it all in. Now, that's the definition of privilege, really, to be in a position that you can do that. So every World Cup is very different. Some I've enjoyed more than others. The last one in Russia was fantastic. I preferred, I was looking forward to the Brazil one much more than I was looking forward to Russia, and I found the experiences to be the other way around. I enjoyed going to Russia much more than Brazil, where the routine was arduous. It was hectic because of just the immense amounts of distance involved in the travel. And we probably ended up, when we were working out who was going to do what, we probably took on a little bit too much each in terms of the number of games that we did. But Russia was brilliant. South Africa, I've been fortunate to have gone there actually and covered the Rugby World Cup back in 1995.
Yeah.
immeasurably in those 15 years, but that was another one that was fantastic. Germany also is a great country, and so on and so forth. So they're brilliant. I really enjoy doing them. I'm looking forward to the next one, which will be very different, a very different experience to each of the ones that I've done before. And then, you know, hopefully, touch wood, somebody's contracted me to do the one in 2026, because I think USA, Canada, Mexico will just be an absolute ball. That would be great. And as an aside, personally, I kind of hope that England wins some games along the way. But we'll see. We'll see. I feel as though we're getting closer.
Yeah, indeed. I think right. You look at every position right now. I think Gary Lineker just tweeted a couple of days ago. I think if the World Cup included only right backs from all the team, I think England is definitely going to make great progress in that regard. And that's indeed true. So talking about commentary colleagues over the years, you've had the privilege of working with so many amazing names. You've mentioned some names that have inspired you, and there are great names that you've worked with as well. There is Jonathan Pierce, there's Alan Parry, there's Martin Tyler, as you've just mentioned, and many more. And who, if you could remember, like if you could talk about some of your best colleagues.
Peter obviously is much loved around the world, and I think that. If I never progress in my career beyond where I am, to say that I was the number 2 to Peter Drury, I will wear that as a badge of honour. Peter is just a great commentator and a great man. He's everything that you can imagine. I speak to him quite frequently. I don't see him very often, as you can imagine. We're at different games. Occasionally I will do a match for radio that he's doing for telly, but by and large, I don't see him very much. He's a very strong family man and a passionate football supporter, and he's just a great guy, because he has the ability to have that turn of phrase for every moment, which is a skill that few have ever mastered in the way that he's got it. So he is somebody that I really look up to as a man and as a broadcaster as well. You mentioned Jonathan Pierce. Jonathan was my boss when I moved to London. I worked for him on Capital Radio, and he was probably the most groundbreaking radio commentator that there has ever been, because he took an industry that perhaps was a little staid and boring, and if you can imagine a sort of a Brit pop football commentator, then I guess he was it. He came along right at the right time, and I think that certainly around Euro 96, where England fell in love with the game again, and he was there providing the soundtrack to it to many people, and it's a high octane, very exuberant style. And when I started, unashamedly, I was similar in style to him, but that was the house style. I worked for Capital Radio, and that's what we were told to do. But you couldn't try and be another Jonathan Pierce, because Jonathan's Jonathan, and another that maybe now doesn't get the credit that he deserves for the work that he's done, because he completely understands both the football industry and broadcasting. He was immersed in football growing up. His father was a coach. Jonathan himself had played until he had a bad injury, but was able to take it on and push the boundaries of the sports broadcasting in this country to places that they'd never been before. He is someone that I hope when he comes to a point when he retires that he does get the credit that he deserves, and that history will look back on his contribution to the radio industry accordingly.
Indeed. Jim, we've had you for long now. I think we've kept you for long, but before we let you leave, if you could give us the 3 best moments of your career in reverse order.
Wow. Okay. Whether I can do it in reverse order off the top of my head, I don't know. So I will buy myself some time and talk about the 1999 FA Cup semi-final replay. between Arsenal and Manchester United
Yeah.
at Villa Park. And I was commentating on that game for local radio. And so as a consequence, our commentary was very sort of pro United, and we wanted United to win. I was doing the game with Frank Stapleton, the old Irish international striker who played for both clubs, but he also very much wanted United to win. And we went for a meal in Birmingham before the game, and I said to him, I've just got a feeling that this will be something special. And it was certainly the most extraordinary 1-1 draw I will ever see in my life. But it was just everything that it encaptured. The Ryan Giggs goal, obviously, is the crowning moment. I say 1-1 draw after 90 minutes before it went to extra time. The Ryan Giggs goal is the crowning moment. But so much had happened before that. The red card, the Peter Schmeichel penalty save from Dennis Bergkamp. They don't win the treble. If Schmeichel doesn't save that penalty, United don't win the treble. And footballing history is very different. The Ryan Giggs goal doesn't get scored. So it was just all the ingredients really on a sultry night in Birmingham at a stadium that I knew very well, having worked at Villa Park dozens and dozens of times in local radio prior to that. That was just a remarkable occasion. I've talked about the 7-1 a bit, but that was another one, the Brazil victory, the defeat to Germany in the World Cup. Because much as I fancied Germany, we'd done a preview the previous night, and I've been happy to go out on a limb and say I think that Germany are good enough to beat this Brazil side, and we talked through how it might happen. I certainly didn't get that bit quite right. Didn't think that Brazil would destruct in the way that they had done, and it got to a stage. There are very few sporting moments that you're watching and you're thinking, okay, this is a little bit uncomfortable now.
Indeed,
you can just stop. It was just relentless, and the goals were just bang, 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 and Brazil had nowhere to go, and they were so shell shocked. I haven't seen a team capitulate in that way. And they got it back and saved a little bit of face, as much as you can, towards the end. But it was just brutal. And as I mentioned, you're sitting there knowing, okay, I'm just watching sporting history unfold here. This is something that will be talked about for many years. So that was a very special night in Belo Horizonte. And then others, well, the 5-1 England win in Munich against Germany, nearly 20 years ago, on a night when England went 1-0 down. That was something that we'll never forget. I didn't commentate that night. I was presenting TalkSport's coverage in Munich, and Alan Parry was commentating. So that was something I'll never forget. Even last season, Southampton, which is my local Premier League side, and one of my sons supports them and was there watching the 9-0 home defeat to Leicester, was another night that he and I will never forget for differing reasons. But you always hope the commentator selfishly that you're there and you get the chance to see history. So, did I want them to score 10? Well, yeah, maybe I did, being selfish about it. I wouldn't want Southampton to lose many games, but yes, that once it got to the stage where it was carnage, you just wanted records to be broken, and so I was fortunate enough to see the biggest home defeat in top flight football history. So that is 3. I'm sure that I could think of another 3 or 33, and they sort of just come to me as time goes on. But the thing is, that over the course of a season, I will probably see 130, 140 games this year. There will be 5 or 6 that would really stand out, that will be special games. And I think they're more special for the fact that you watch others that aren't special. I think that's the thing of being a football supporter. I support Torquay United. They're not very good, but when they win stuff, I think I appreciate it more for the fact that I've sat through years of mediocrity, and sometimes years when we aspire to being mediocre. So when you get a good team, and we're going to have a good season this time around, I think it makes it more special. So that's the thing for supporters. They've sat through lots of days where it hasn't gone their way. So when everything clicks and you get a fantastic moment like those that I've mentioned, that it just makes it all the better for it.
Indeed, you've talked about making day special. You've made our day special definitely by coming
Well,
on
that's
the
very
page. Thank
kind.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jim. It was really incredible having you. So we hope your Premier League season goes on brilliantly, and I hope you provide many more amazing moments. Thank you so much.
Well, it's very kind. Nice to meet you. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.